Shalom.
Welcome to Hebrew as we study the Torah portion through the lens of relationships. We are in Leviticus and we are at the end of Leviticus. Yay! We've gotten through a book. And so let's go ahead and dig right in.
The portion that we're doing today is called Parasha Bechukotai. It is Vayikra or Leviticus 26 verse 3 through 27:34, which is the end of the book. Bechukotai means in my statutes or laws. And we're going to dig right into this. Basically, this chapter is a mirror of another chapter that is later in Deuteronomy, which is commonly called the Blessings and Cursings chapter. It's basically talking about the things that happen when you either obey or disobey.
Yeah.
So we're going to go right ahead and we're going to read verse 3 and also verses 14 through 15 in chapter 26.
Okay, so 3. If you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments so as to carry them out. And then 14 and 15. But if you do not obey me and do not carry out all these commandments, if indeed you reject my statutes, and if your soul abhors my ordinances so as not to carry out all my commandments, and so break my covenant.
So this is basically the famous if-then statements. If you do this, then I do this. Or probably the better way to even look at it is if you do this, then this is going to happen.
Yeah.
It's automatically built in a lot of these things. It's just the consequence or the reward.
Yeah.
So Elohim is telling Israel about the rewards or the consequences of their thoughts, their attitudes, their words, their actions, all the things that he's been addressing for the past several chapters, or even more accurately, since he brought them out of slavery in Egypt. These things that he's talking about, if you do them or obey, or if you reject them, which is a terrible, terrible concept to reject. If you reject them or disobey them. So the things that he's talking about are the hukot, which are the statutes, the mitzvot, which are the commands, the mishpatim, which are the judgments. So, I mean, all these are the things that have been discussed very much so since chapter 17 in Leviticus and really, even much further back than that as we go back to when he brought them out of Sinai. Yeah. They are blessings for obedience. They're curses for disobedience. Yeah. So how can we apply this to our relationships today?
Yeah, so when we look at relationships, since we're studying the Torah portion through the lens of relationships, what relationships are we talking about? Well, we're talking about relationships with God, the most important one that we need to go ahead and have. And then we also have relationships within our, marriage relationship. And then we have our relationships within a future spouse or somebody that we are dating or courting. Then we have relationships within our parents, either our elderly parents or our parents that we still live at home with, or it could possibly be our children that we have. And then we have our coworkers, and then we have the general stranger around us, people that we meet at the store, people that are, we go out to dinner with and we meet somebody there. And then we also have our community of people too, within our local assembly and our local fellowship. So what kind of relationships do we have within this? What kind of commitment do we have with these people? What kind of disobedience is going to happen if we disobey or don't follow through on our different commitments that we go ahead and have?
Yeah, each of these relationships, when we think about them, they have parameters.
Yeah.
They have boundaries. We've been talking about these things at length for some time now. So what happens when our thoughts and our attitudes, which are things that are much more difficult to govern than the rest, because everything flows out from what you think, and that creates an attitude, and then that brings forth words, and that brings forth actions. But all of these, they have consequences. Yeah. There's a consequence. It could be a positive consequence or it can be a negative consequence. Yeah. So when you are in your relationship with Elohim, and you do the things that he has commanded us to do, when you do the things he's commanded us to do towards him, or we do the things that he's commanded us to do towards people, when we do it, there's positive consequences. We see that spelled out pretty well here in verses 4 through 13. And then when we reject them, we may not see it as rejecting, but we're just deciding to do it the way we want to do it instead of the way he said to do it. Then that's when we get into all of these other things that go throughout the rest of the chapter until about verse 40 that are called the cursings. So, I mean, that's the way it works with him. But, in our other relationships as well, there's parameters around it. And the things that we think, which bring forth attitudes and words and actions, those things have consequences. Let's just, say for your spouse. You have a husband, because I'll call it, husbands are prone to do this. You hear this more than often about us. If you leave your dirty clothes on the floor, on a heap, or dirty socks anywhere, that causes a piece of irritation for your spouse. And if your spouse, goes ahead and tells you about that, then you need to love them enough to try to keep from irritating them. And we'll get into this a little bit more. That's just, one example. You've also, got parents and children. We talked a little bit in our last video when we went to Ephesians about not provoking your children. Children, on the other hand, also don't need to be provoking their parents. We don't want to provoke anybody.
So it's one of those things of like, okay, let's go ahead and show kindness and loving kindness to each other, and let's go ahead and do what's expected of us. Again, it sort of goes back to expectations. God has already told us, hey, keep my word, keep my commandments, and do these different things, and you're going to go ahead and receive some of this stuff. If you don't do some of this, then you're going to go ahead and have problems. If you look at it as drinking and driving, okay, all of us know that you should not drink and drive. There's a consequence with that. You could get hurt. You could end up hurting somebody else. You have a big machine that you are behind, that you are driving, that you really could hurt somebody. And if you drink and drive, guess what? You are going to have a consequence. You're going to either go to jail, you could possibly kill somebody and really go to jail for a very long time. By doing so, that is a huge consequence. Within that, versus smaller little consequences, you could be building up resentment within your heart, or within your spouse's heart, within your children's heart, because of the things that you're doing, your actions that you are showing to them, the disdain that you are showing within that relationship, because you are not loving them and respecting them enough to go ahead and listen to the instructions that they're giving you, listening to what they have to go ahead and say, and be like, hey, you having your socks on the floor in the middle of us walking really is causing a tripping hazard. Can you please try to go ahead and pick up, your socks off the floor every single night? Like, how hard is that, to go ahead and do while you're on your way to the bedroom? Just pick up your socks, drop them in the hamper then. It's not that big of a deal in a way. And it's a matter of taking a step and reminding yourself, okay, this is what I need to go ahead and do. It's the same thing in regards to us needing to, in a way, self-love ourselves too. Again, it goes back to the thoughts, like you said. We also have to remind ourselves that we are chosen, that we are, kings and queens, of God, and we are his kids, and he loves us for who we are. And so because of that, we need to go remind ourselves of that positive thought as well.
And I guess just a little add-on, not that I really have an issue with putting socks on the floor.
No, these are just examples.
These are examples. I've got issues, and we work our way through them, and I'll just give you, the reason why you would work your way through them, because a relationship is an agreement. I mean, if you nail it down, even the example of driving a car, it has been a long time for a lot of us, but when we actually got our first driver's license and we took that test and all those things, we actually made an agreement that if we get behind the wheel of a vehicle, then I agree to abide by the laws that govern this, motor vehicle. That includes stop signs and speed limits and yielding to pedestrians, and it involves drinking and driving. So, I mean, when we violate that agreement, there's consequences. When we violate the agreement with Elohim, the covenant, there's consequences. On the other hand, with driving, if you don't have accidents and things of that nature, one of the rewards of that is your insurance doesn't cost as much.
Yeah, you have low insurance.
So
that's a positive.
So I mean, it's all about, there are rewards and consequences for our behaviors. But the reason that, you want to change those and have the good behaviors is to take the example of the socks on the floor. You're doing a behavior, you're really inside of yourself, you don't see any problem with it. Like, I don't care if there's socks on the floor, it doesn't bother me any. But your spouse is telling you, this is irritating me. And if you take the time to understand that, then you're like, oh, well, it doesn't matter really to me. But this thing that I'm doing is disturbing her peace. It's disturbing her shalom. And that's not what I want to do, because I love her and I want her to be happy. So if all I have to do is pause for a second and pick up my socks and put them in the proper place, and she's in a better spot, she has shalom, that is not a terrible price to pay for the person I love.
Yeah, that's very true. It is. Again, you're showing love towards somebody. You're showing that you care about them and that you've been listening to what they have to go ahead and say. Why not go ahead and change something? And it might take a little bit of a reminder. You might have to have a sticky note by the side of your bed saying, did you pick up your socks? And if you didn't, you might have to get up out of bed and go grab your socks and put them away. There's little things like that just makes some people's world a whole lot better. It just depends on that individual person. Each relationship is going to have their one thing that really just drives them nuts. And why not go ahead and fix it? If it's able to go ahead and get fixed, why not go ahead and do that?
Definitely. We got one more point we'll make in the video, and that's going to be in verses 40 through 42. So reading chapter 26, verses 40 through 42, it says, "But if they confess their crookedness and the crookedness of their fathers with their trespass in which they trespassed against me, and that they also have walked contrary to me, that I also have walked contrary to them, and have brought them into the land of their enemies, if their uncircumcised heart is then humbled, and they accept the punishment of their crookedness, then I shall remember my covenant with Yaakov, and also my covenant with Yitzhak, and also remember my covenant with Abraham, and remember the land." So, this has to do with, you're in the consequence. Whatever it is, you thought it birthed attitudes, words, and actions. Now you're dealing with the negative consequences of those things. And you actually, are like, I want to fix this. So that's kind of where we are. So when we deal with our relationships, we have to basically realize that this is part of that as well.
Yeah, it is, and it's one of those things of confessing that you've done wrong, asking for forgiveness, and then changing. You need to turn from your wicked ways. You need to turn from whatever that negative behavior was. Sometimes you have to get professional help to be able to go ahead and turn around and go ahead and change that behavior. Sometimes you're able to go ahead and do it yourself alongside with God and have Him go ahead and help you. And it might be a daily reminder that you have to go ahead and do this thing and be like, okay, I need to obey the speed limit, or I need to, pick up my socks, or I need to unload the dishwasher morning and night. There can be little things and little steps to go ahead and do, and just ask God to go ahead and help you, and then change. And your spouse or the person in your life is going to go ahead and start seeing that change and realize, okay, this person has changed. Okay, I don't need to harp on them. Harping is never good, you guys. It just isn't. it's a matter of, okay, is this person changing? And if they are, great, let's give a high five, just like we do with our little kids. You know, you want to encourage them that they can get dressed by themselves. It's the same thing in regards to all of us like to have that encouragement that we are changing, that there is growth going on.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, if you're, the one that is doing the negative behavior, and in turn you're getting your negative consequence, so that's what you need to do. Yeah. The person that is on the other side of that, the person who is being offended, the person who is, asking, can you please hear me on this so that we can have understanding, that person does also have a responsibility in that. To be willing to accept the apology, or at the very least be like, okay, I hear what you're saying, and please continue, start doing this.
Yeah.
And let's see how this plays out. Let's see if you are able to go ahead and do this, and I'll be happy to restore the relationship if you truly show me that you love me, and you want to help me in this. Yeah. But I mean, it is it takes both people doing something. Yes. Obviously the one who has offended has more work to do, but the other person has to be open to the other person desiring to restore the relationship.
Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah,
it's very true.
So we have finished our study of relationships in Vayikra, in Leviticus, and traditionally, when we finish reading one of these books of the Torah, we say a certain phrase. So I will do that for us and add a little bit onto it. But the phrase that we say when we finish up a book of the Torah in the cycle is Chazak, Chazak, V'nitz Kazik, which means be strong, and may we be strengthened. I will add on to that. May we be strengthened in our relationships with Elohim, with his people, with our families, with our work, our community. May the wisdom of Yah's Torah help us to establish, to maintain, to grow successful relationships. Yeah. That's the end result and desire that we have for doing these videos and for studying Yah's instructions in this way. Is to have those beautiful, successful relationships.
Yeah, he's all about those relationships. He wants that with us, and he desires, that relationship with you. And so we hope that you do dig in deep into his scriptures and into his word, because he has so much to go ahead and say to us, his kids. So thanks for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe, and continue to follow us on Instagram and on Facebook, and of course here on YouTube as well. And we will chat later. Bye.
Shalom.